the noise of the modern desert. The world hums like a machine that forgot how to rest. Phones vibrate, screens glow, and the endless scroll of updates replaces the rhythm of breath. People sleep with earbuds whispering new fears. Traffic roars. Notifications sing like synthetic birds. And in that noise, the human soul whispers, "I can't hear myself anymore." There was a time when silence was not feared, when solitude was not punishment, when people fled not from boredom, but from excess, when they sought a place so quiet that even their thoughts bowed down. That time has been forgotten, but the desert remembers. The desert, the place where sound dies and truth survives. A horizon of emptiness that reflects what you bring into it. If you carry fear, you will meet it there. If you carry faith, you will meet God. The desert never flatters, never lies. It strips everything unnecessary until only the essential remains. And once, long ago, people heard its call. They left behind cities of marble and markets of gold. They went where there was nothing, so they could find the one who was everything. They were called the Desert Hermits, forgotten by time, remembered by silence. They are the mirror we've lost in our world of noise. The first hermits. When silence became a calling, it began in Egypt, under the scorching sun of the 3rd century. A young man named Antony heard a voice in church that changed everything. The gospel was read aloud. "If you would be perfect, sell all you have, give to the poor, and come, follow me." Antony did not debate or analyze, he simply obeyed. He sold his family's lands, gave away his wealth, and walked into the desert. The villagers thought him mad. Why would a man choose heat over comfort, hunger over harvest, solitude over song? But Antony was not running from the world. He was running towards something greater. He sought the silence where God still whispered beneath the noise of men. In that silence, Antony wrestled with himself. Demons of hunger, lust, pride, despair, all visited his cave. He did not escape them, he endured them. And through that endurance, his heart became a mirror so clear that even heaven could see its reflection. Others followed him, men and women who wanted what the world could not give. They became known as the Desert Fathers and Mothers. They lived in caves, huts, abandoned tombs, alone, but never lonely. Their solitude was full, like a chalice overflowing with invisible wine. They discovered truths that no empire could teach, that the human soul needs emptiness as lungs need air, that silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of eternity, that the desert, though cruel to the flesh, is kind to the spirit. Their words were few, but they burned through centuries. Go, sit in your cell, and your cell will teach you everything. Take refuge within yourself, and you will find the well that never runs dry. Wisdom. Sigh. Silence is the language of God. Silence is terrifying to modern ears. We fill every second with voices, our own or others. We fear what will surface when the noise stops. But to the hermits, silence was not a void. It was the first language of heaven. When the world speaks, it divides. When silence speaks, it unites. They said that in silence, even stones pray. In silence, the mind stops performing, and the heart starts remembering. The hermits did not escape speech. They purified it. They learned to speak only after listening. One desert father said, "If your words do not heal, keep them in your heart until they do." Silence taught them patience. It taught them how to live slowly enough to hear the difference between desire and truth. When they prayed, it was not to change God's mind, but to empty their own. They discovered that God does not shout over the storm. He waits until the storm grows tired. Modern life fears this waiting. We worship speed, efficiency, productivity. But the hermits teach us it is better to lose time with God than to save it with noise. In their silence, miracles happened quietly. A scorpion's sting healed after prayer. Water flowed from dry rock. But the real miracle was not in nature, it was in the heart. They became unafraid of being forgotten because they had remembered what truly matters. Today, silence has become a luxury sold in retreats and apps. But for the hermits, it was free. It lived inside them like a sacred breath. To sit in silence was to sit before God, without costume, without defense. To hear the silence was to hear the sound that made the world. Wisdom, niksu, simplicity is freedom. In the cities of the empire, people built towers and chased wealth. In the desert, a man could survive with a cloak, a loaf, and a prayer. Simplicity was not poverty, it was freedom. They said, when you own little, you have little to fear losing. The hermits discovered a strange equation. The less they carried, the more they could hold. The fewer possessions, the more presence. They traded comfort for clarity, excess for eternity. Antony wore the same garment until it fell apart. He ate bread and salt, sometimes dates when God was generous. He slept on sand and woke with stars as his ceiling. And yet, he was called rich beyond kings because peace had no price. One story tells of a visitor who offered gold to a hermit. The hermit smiled and said, "Why give me what already burdens you?" In a world where greed was normal, their simplicity looked like rebellion. But it was the truest revolution, because it began in the soul. They were not anti-world, they were pro-truth. They understood that when your hands are full of possessions, they cannot hold God. They believed salvation begins not in having less, but in needing less. Simplicity made space for prayer, for compassion, for joy. It stripped away the unnecessary until what remained was luminous. Even their words were simple. Love, forgive, endure, wait. And in those few words, entire libraries of wisdom were contained. Imagine if we lived like that now. If our schedules were not prisons. If our hunger for more became hunger for meaning. If we could say, enough, and finally rest. The hermits still whisper across centuries. The world is heavy with things that do not matter. Lay them down, and you will feel the ground of heaven beneath your feet. The sun sets over the desert. The sand glows like fire, and the wind carries the faint smell of bread and prayer. The hermits kneel in the last light of day, and though they speak no words, the silence between them feels like a hymn. They did not leave the world to forget it. They left to love it more truly. From their solitude came compassion deeper than speech, patience stronger than time. And maybe that's the lesson we've forgotten. To heal a noisy world, you must first become quiet inside. The night falls, stars appear, thousands, infinite. And beneath them, one figure sits still, eyes closed, lips barely moving. The desert listens. God listens. And somewhere, beyond the noise of our modern lives, the silence waits for us too. Wisdom 3. Solitude is not isolation. The desert is full of voices that do not speak. Wind, stone, fire, memory. All whisper the same question. When was the last time you were truly alone? To most of us, solitude sounds like exile. But for the hermits, solitude was communion without interruption. They left behind crowds to find clarity, not to escape humanity, but to rediscover what it meant to be human. One of them said, "If you cannot be at peace alone, you will not be at peace with others." Their solitude was not escape, it was encounter. They met their fears and called them by name. They met their desires and learned which ones were holy. They met God, not in cathedrals of stone, but in cathedrals of sky. When Antony prayed alone, he said he could hear the heartbeat of creation. Each grain of sand became a psalm, each gust of wind a verse from Genesis. He realized he was never truly alone, only undistracted. In that solitude, he learned that love cannot exist without distance. Just as music needs silence between notes, so the soul needs spaces of stillness to remember how to love. Modern life mistakes loneliness for failure. We fear being alone so much that we surround ourselves with noise. But the hermits remind us, solitude is not absence, it is presence magnified. When we dare to sit in silence, we begin to feel what we have been avoiding, and what we feel begins to heal. They taught that a man who can sit with himself without flinching has already defeated half the demons of the world. Their solitude gave birth to compassion. Because when you meet yourself truthfully, you stop judging others so quickly. In the desert, a hermit prayed, "Lord, teach me to see every soul as I see the sunrise, not for its perfection, but for its promise." Wisdom 4. The battle within. Not all deserts are made of sand. Some are made of thoughts. The most relentless storms are not outside, but inside the mind. The hermits knew this battle well. They called it the War of the Heart. It was not fought with swords, but with attention. Every temptation, pride, lust, despair came disguised as thought. And the only weapon was awareness baptized in prayer. They learned to watch their minds as a shepherd watches his flock. When a thought of anger came, they did not chase it. When desire came, they named it softly and let it pass. They said, "Do not wrestle the serpent, simply watch it leave." But some thoughts were stubborn. They returned like ghosts, hungry for recognition. For those moments, they had one rule: stay still. A hermit once said, "Stand firm in your heart, and the storm will exhaust itself before you do." They called this inner stillness hesychia, holy quietude. It was not the absence of struggle. It was the refusal to let struggle define you. Modern chaos is the same war in different clothing. Our demons have Wi-Fi now. They whisper through screens, likes, and deadlines. They tempt us not with sin, but with distraction. They tell us that peace must be earned, that rest is weakness, that value equals visibility. The desert fathers would weep to see us so enslaved by noise, and yet they would understand. Because they too lived with noise, only theirs came from within. They would say to us, "Your phone is your marketplace. Your mind is your wilderness. Both can become temples, if you remember to pray." The greatest miracle of the hermits was not levitation or prophecy. It was endurance. They endured themselves until they found mercy within. They discovered that peace is not victory over chaos, but friendship with it. When Antony was asked how he fought temptation, he said, "I do not fight. I stay still, and God fights for me." That is desert wisdom. To face the storm, not with defiance, but with presence so pure that even fear forgets its name. Wisdom. The return of the inner desert. Centuries have passed. The hermits' caves are ruins now, their bones turned to dust, their prayers floating somewhere between constellations. But their wisdom has not died. It has moved inward. The new desert is not in Egypt or Syria. It is inside us. Every person carries a wilderness waiting to be walked. Our deserts are made of silence we avoid, truths we bury, emotions we mute. And yet, like the sands of old, they hold treasures beneath their surface. The call to the desert has never stopped. It has only changed address. It whispers in the moments between breaths, in the hunger that no pleasure fills, in the weariness that no success cures. It says, "Come away for a while. Lay down your burdens. The world will still be here when you return, but you will not be the same. You do not need to flee your city. You do not need a cave or a cloak. You only need the courage to turn off the noise and meet the silence inside you. The ancient hermit spent 40 years in the desert to learn what you can begin to learn in a single moment of stillness. Sit. Breathe. Do not reach for your phone. Do not explain your thoughts away. Just let the silence do what it was always meant to do. Heal. In that stillness, you will find that the desert is not empty. It is full of presence, of grace, of God. You will begin to notice small things. The hum of your breath, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the pulse in your wrist reminding you that you are still here. And then, slowly, you will realize something the hermits knew all along, that peace does not come from escaping the world, but from forgiving it. Forgiving the noise for being loud. Forgiving yourself for getting lost in it. Forgiving others for their chaos, because they too are wandering deserts seeking rain. When you forgive, the inner desert blooms. Cacti flower. Dry riverbeds fill. And what was once barren becomes sanctuary. This is the wisdom the hermits left us. Not how to run away from the world, but how to find holiness within it. When the silence speaks again, the wind moves over the dunes. Footprints vanish almost as soon as they are made. The sky turns gold, then crimson, then the deep blue of infinity. In that endless horizon, you see it clearly. The hermits were never running away from life. They were running toward the truth we keep postponing, that all noise ends, but love remains. They lived without clocks, and yet understood time better than we do. They had nothing, and yet lacked nothing. Their silence was not escape, it was revelation. And perhaps that is what we are all still seeking. A silence that does not feel empty. A solitude that does not ache. A simplicity that feels like home. The modern world will not become less chaotic, but you can become less captive to it. You can choose even now to listen as they did, to find your desert, to remember that beneath the noise, beneath the striving and the screens, there is still a holy stillness waiting. And if you dare to enter it, not with fear, but with faith, you may hear what the hermits heard, the quiet voice that says, "You are not lost, you are simply loud. Be still and remember." The wind softens, the last light fades. In the distance, you imagine the silhouette of a man in a simple robe, kneeling, hands open, face lifted toward the unseen. He does not speak, and yet everything around him listens. The stars shimmer above like beads on a monk's prayer cord. The sand hums, and in that hum, you hear the echo of their timeless vow. We went into the desert to find God, but it was God who found us.